Hi guys, how you doing? My name is Joe Valdez. Today I'm going to teach you how to roast a rack of lamb. And when I say roast, I'm actually going to start it in a pan, baste it a little bit, finish it in the oven, and then I have some nice pearl onions and confit potatoes and a little broccoli rapini to go with it. So I actually have our lamb in a marinade. I started it last night. It's just some yogurt, a little bit of sage, and some lemon. I'm going to pull that out, we're going to wash it off, and then I'm going to let it dry and kind of sit out at room temperature for a little while. But I just want you guys to have these skills and these techniques, because a rack of lamb really impresses a lot of people, but it's really not that difficult to do. So just a little variations here and there, and you're good to go. So let's get started. Alright guys, so I've got my lamb. I've marinated it for a day. I've got it in some plain yogurt, and I threw some sage and some lemon in too. Okay, now what this yogurt does is it helps break down some of the connective tissue in the lamb. I also find that it takes away a lot of the gaminess. Okay, so this is just a Frenched rack of lamb, and what it means by Frenched is the bones are cleaned up. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this sit out at room temperature for a little while. I just want to get it washed off right now and cleaned up a little bit. We'll let it kind of dry out. We'll let it sit at room temperature, and then we'll go ahead and season it up and pan roast it. So, you know, as long as you use plain yogurt, you know, you should have no problem with flavoring or anything like that. I just find that the lamb rack itself is a lot more tender whenever it's marinated in yogurt, and like I said, it helps break down some of this connective tissue. The probiotics that are in yogurt help with that. Okay, just making sure it's nice and clean. I'm gonna pat it dry and kind of let it sit out at room temperature for a while. So next we'll move on to seasoning and grilling. Alright guys, so our lamb is nice and rinsed. We got that yogurt and that lemon and that sage off of it. I do have my mineral pan on a nice medium. It's very, very warm. Okay, I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. Get some oil in the pan. Oh, you see it smoking. Alright, so I'm actually going to turn it down. And this is just one of those intuitive things. You see something's hot, take it off the heat, turn it off the burner. I don't want to smoke out my house too bad, so I'm just going to leave it over there for a minute. Meanwhile, I'm going to season this rack of lamb. Okay, remember, salt high, so that way it spreads evenly. Make sure that you know your salt. Okay, I'll try to always use kosher. Okay, so there's one side. We'll get this other side going too. And this lamb, it has a nice piece of fat right here. The most important part for me personally is to make sure that this fat right here is rendered. Okay, and what that means is that the fat is cooked out of it, a lot of the moisture is gone, and that's what really firms up that fat, gives it great flavor, and that way you're not chewing on it, right? Nobody likes chewing on fat. So this is a French rack. So French essentially just means, again, that these are trimmed down, okay, and everything is off of those. So our pan is not smoking anymore, so I'm going to put it back over the heat, turn it up to a medium, and I'm going to see if I can lay this in. Now, you want to hear that crackling? Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. About a medium high right there. We'll get a really nice sear on it, and then we'll get our butter and our herbs in, and then we'll start to baste it, and then I'm going to finish it in the oven. You see that great sear on it? A lot of that fat is already starting to render out. There's a lot more liquid in the pan than when we started. Turn it down just a little bit. Now that yogurt, what that did is the probiotics in it actually help loosen a lot of the tendons and a lot of the cartilage and a lot of the fat that's in here. So you'll find that this lamb is very, very soft. Okay, and it actually took out a lot of the blood. If you saw the yogurt before and after the lamb, you will notice that there was a lot of red in it, a lot of tinted red, and it just drew out the blood, and that's good. That means that a lot of the moisture came out of it. It just makes the cooking process a lot easier. And also, I like the flavor of it after the yogurt brine. It just essentially, it makes it a lot less gamey than before. Okay, so, you know, still not cooked. I'm gonna try and sear these sides really quick. A nice light little sear. Okay. All right. So essentially now is when I'm gonna start our butter. Got our garlic right here too. I'm gonna lay that in there. And all these really do is they add a lot of flavor to the liquid that we're gonna be basting with. Some garlic, some shallots, some thyme. Make sure you put the thyme away from you. I also have some rosemary going in right there. Now, I talked about rendering that fat. This whole back piece right here is nice and fatty too, and especially right there inside. So I'm going to make sure that I try to baste this more than the rest. Okay, I'm going to turn this down again. Go ahead and get our butter in. Not like room temp butter. That way, if you put cold butter in the pan, it won't drop the temperature of the pan. And what that essentially does is it will actually create steam more than cooking. And you never want to really steam meat. Okay. Oh, this smells delicious again. And with the shallots, I just use like scraps, any garlic scraps you have going on. Because, you know, we're not really going to be eating this, nor really presenting it. Look at that back. All that fat nice and rendered out. Great crust on it. That's what that salt also creates, is a great crust. Okay, so I'm pouring this, basting this hot liquid onto that fat to help cook it. Right? Because we don't want to be chewing on that. Maybe I turned it down a little too far. And whenever you have a high dollar protein like a steak or a lamb or anything like that in a saute pan, you really don't want to walk away from it. Okay, so I'm just kind of hanging out here, trying to cook that top, render some of that fat out right there. And here in a minute, we're going to wrap up these bones and we're going to get them actually in the oven. You see all this butter and oil frothing up there? That's cooking, right? It's helping cooking some of this this fat up here. One of the things I do not enjoy about lamb is when it's all chewy. So you see the color difference already? Where it was almost translucent before and now it's a little more opaque. Turn it up, finish the basting. I'm gonna add a little bit more butter. Let that butter heat up. Alright, I think we're ready to go. Look at that nice crust on it. Still really colorful. Go ahead and get it on this little sheet tray right here. Okay, and essentially what I'm going to do is, in order to keep these from burning, these bones up here, just for presentation purposes, I'm going to wrap these up in foil when they go in the oven. Gotta be careful, these are nice and hot right now. Okay, lay that down just like that. So you see how it's still really spongy? That's great. It's still about a rare. Now, lamb chops or a rack of lamb are cooked very funny. Okay, so you have to be careful not to overcook or undercook them. So these are going to go in the oven maybe about 5 minutes, and then we're going to let them rest. Meanwhile, we're going to get our sides together. Alright guys, so I've got our lamb in the oven. Like I said, it's only going to be in about 5 minutes or so. Now, these two side dishes I prepped ahead of time. I have some blanched broccolini, and I just blanched it in regular boiling water, no salt, no anything. So I'm going to season it right here in the pan. And then I have some confit potatoes as well as some confit pearl onions. And essentially these are already cooked, okay? I just want to roast them, give them a little color, heat them back up, okay? They just came out of the fridge, so I have a nice little saute pan here and in there. I'm going to start with a little bit of oil. Get these in. Okay, making sure that I like that flat side down first. Okay. Turn down to a nice low. Tiny bit of salt. I like some pepper on my potatoes and onions. Okay, now the broccolini, like I said, this is already cooked. I essentially just want to heat this back up. You know, when I prep vegetables for the week, I like to kind of do them all in big bunches. That way I'm not, you know, having to boil water every single night and cooling things down every single night. I like to do them a little bit ahead, so I'll do, you know, a bag or two of potatoes for the week. Just like my baked potatoes, I'll cook some Brussels sprouts and some broccolini for one night and use them up the next night or so. You gotta remember, a lot of kitchens do prep every single day, and it's not always just for that day, you know. Sometimes it's for a day ahead, 2 days ahead. You just gotta manage your fridge and manage everything you have going on. So I just salted that broccolini a little bit. I'm gonna hit it with some white wine to help the heating up process in this wok pan. Check on some of our roasted potatoes. Looking pretty good. Now, when I talk about confit potatoes, I love these baby gems. And all you got to do is put them in a cold pot, fill the pot with oil to barely cover the potatoes. Okay? And then I turn the heat on to high. And once the oil is bubbling with the potatoes inside, I let it bubble for about 5 minutes, and then I shut off the heat and I let them rest in the oil for about another 10 minutes. You take them out, you drain them, and you're ready to go. All you gotta do is cool them off, and then chop them up like these are. Some of these are cut in half, and you're ready to go. And then all I do is I roast them to order, bring them back up to temperature. So you see that color on it? That's perfect, right? Got some nice pearl onions in there with them. Confit potatoes, and then I just roast them right here. And those will be ready here in just a second. Going back to our broccolini. Tiny bit of oil, a little bit of salt, some white wine. Alright, and those are ready too. In literally no time we're going to be pulling this lamb out and letting it rest. And we'll move on to plating. Alright guys, so our rack of lamb has now rested about 5 minutes or so, and we have all of our sides and we're ready to plate. Again, this probably came up about a whole temperature in the oven and then resting. So shooting for a little medium rare here, and that's great. And with any steak or lamb or really any red meat, and I actually rest my pork too, it's important to let those juices kind of reincorporate themselves. Alright. And when you cut a rack of lamb, kind of just gotta go with the flow. Kind of gotta go a little bit sideways sometimes. Okay, so have our beautiful rack. Just a little bit on the rare side to medium rare. That's great, but the most important part is actually the fat up there and making sure that it is rendered out. I'm gonna plate this roasted lamb. I have a warm romesco sauce that I like to make. Romesco sauce is just roasted red pepper and some toasted nuts, garlic, extra virgin olive oil. Okay, and again, you don't have to be fancy in order to cook this. Okay, this is just a little fun for me. Overall, all of these flavors with the romesco and the confit potatoes and the rapini and the lamb, they all just go so well together for me in my house and what we like to do. So there's our confit potatoes and pearl onions, our rapini. Get some of our beautiful lamb up here. Just nice and rested. Alright guys, roasted rack of lamb, confit potatoes, broccolini and romesco. Hope you guys give it a try and enjoy.